Hello pilots! In this video I would like to show a new attempt to win escalation with helicopters without dying. We still remember the first attempt painfully. After dropping the first container, I wanted to maneuver the Tarantula to the second corvette. This time I didn't want to be killed by pile drivers, but to take a new approach. Instead of relying on the corvettes and ships in general, I wanted to destroy the enemy production of airframes and vehicles as quickly as possible in order to give the Allied troops a temporary overview. My first destination was the factories far south, still behind Sandrift. The way there should lead me through enemy terrain. But I thought that it might be possible to find a way to slip behind the enemy lines. After all, the Chicane is a stealth helicopter, at least by name. And I thought the idea was cool to penetrate far into the enemy's interior right at the start of the mission and cause great damage. Before I go into raptures about how cool it feels to fly close to the ground and take advantage over every little hill, let's take a look at the recordings. At the beginning, I started from K92 highway strip and flew directly south. Before I could attack the vehicle depot's defenses, a chicane came towards me. I used the hill as cover and fired 2 kingpins at the helicopter. Due to the short distance to the target, the chicane had no time to dodge and was hit hard. Next, I wanted to destroy the ammo truck, hoping that the explosion would destroy or weaken nearby enemies. Incoming IR missiles were easy to fend off with flares. I knew from previous attempts that the vehicle depot was defended by these new short-range anti-air units. I approached them in low-level flight and wanted to take them out before they opened fire on me. Since I knew roughly where the units were located, I managed to take them out without suffering any damage. Now I had to continue flying south. Behind the mountains, a SAM and Anvil position was waiting for me, but the kingpins should be able to neutralize the targets thanks to their speed. I fire 2 missiles per target, as both are capable of blocking incoming missiles. Further south is a bolt strike positioned, which opened fire on me. But the low flight gave me the necessary security to advance further. The basic idea is always the same. Get as close as possible to the enemy so that he has no time to react. And as unnoticed as possible. Right next to the bolt strike is another bunker. This deals only minor damage at a short distance, but can take away the chicane's performance with lucky hits. So I took it under fire with kingpins. Satellite reconnaissance stated that the factories are protected by an aero sentry spec and a linebreaker SAM unit. I didn't have any information about the targets and the data link yet, so I had to gain altitude briefly to clarify the situation. Afterwards, it was necessary to quickly regain ground proximity so that incoming fire could be avoided. AGM-48s are a good choice if you want to shoot at reconnaissance targets from cover. For the aerosentry, I used 2 missiles, whereby one would have been enough for the short distance. To be on the safe side, I fired 3 missiles at the SAM unit. I shot a kingpin at the storage tank. I think its explosion also causes damage to nearby buildings. Now it was time to tear down all the buildings with a cannon. Then I remembered that I still wanted to bring the ships into position, so I made a short stop and gave movement orders to the corvettes. Since I still had ammunition, I was able to attack various targets on the way back. An ammunition truck whose explosion caused the nearby vehicle depot to collapse. A linebreaker Sam and another truck. I was close enough to let the gun do the talking again. Since I still had some kingpins left, I was able to destroy the air defense at the other vehicle depot behind the mountain as well. Finally, I was able to fire my last AGM-48 at an IFV and then make my way back to base. The first sortie was a complete success. At least everything went according to plan. I always invested the money I earned directly in new ground troops. I think it might make sense to just wait at a certain point in time to wait for the cooldown for a new convoy. Otherwise you won't get rid of the money, which is tantamount to a missed opportunity. Now the destination was the factories at Dust Bowl. The airport itself had not yet been captured, but that should not slow down my attack. However, a power pole made it to a certain extent, swallowing 3 of my missiles, so I had to take the SAM unit under fire again. Now it was time to let the cannon do the talking again.
VRS.
After the primary targets were destroyed, I wanted to neutralize the nearby radar station, to make future actions easier, for example the capture of Dust Bowl. I was able to use the mountain well as cover and use AGMs-48s to destroy the radar station's defenses. Finally, I used 3 ATP-1s to decommission the station itself. I made my way home and wanted to get rid of my remaining missiles on the way. The corvettes tried to fire at me with radar-guided missiles, but the terrain offered enough cover. There were only a few troops driving through the airbase. I took aim at a linebreaker SAM and fired 2 ATP-1s at it. One missile was repelled, one reached its target. Clean. Another SAM unit was destroyed by an allied tank. I still had a few missiles, so I opened fire on an MSV MRAP. However, the first AGM-48 missed the target. I couldn't let that sit on me, which is why I'm following up with another missile. The nearest base was Maris Helipad, so I set off to collect my bonus points. The enemy's corvettes were still active and drove in formation towards Port Maris. Although the allied corvettes were about to open fire on the enemy, I wanted to send a few missiles on their way to be on the safe side. Since there was no cover in the immediate vicinity of the corvettes and I didn't want to shorten the distance with close flights over the water, I shot down the missiles from a distance of almost 8 kilometers. Very inconvenient, because the onboard guns of the corvette were thus able to fend off all incoming missiles. Without any major detours, I wanted to recharge my ammunition directly and ended up next to the ammunition truck. But even after I had fired a few shots with the cannon and dropped a few flares, the ammunition didn't work. So to the next sortie. The first corvette gave the impression of being on the verge of sinking, but the second seemed to be still in full tact. So I got into the chicane again and equipped it with kingpins this time, thinking that the fast missiles would do more damage. However, I came across an ibis which completed the attacks of the allied corvettes, so I turned right away and returned to the helipad. It was time to defend Dustbor from an approaching convoy. From memory, it was clear to me that it has quite a bit of air defense. So I wanted to use the nearby refinery as cover. I was able to select all the targets in advance, but I didn't know their current position. But a quick look over the refinery allows me to spot all enemy positions, fire all my ATP-1s and then dive right back down. Slowly, it was time for the pile drivers to start their work. To my regret, I didn't manage to neutralize all enemies fast enough, so the remaining targets were locked on as targets by the pile drivers. Dust Bowl had been taken by now, but this nuclear attack destroyed all the buildings of the airbase. Since the helipad at Port Maris has also been destroyed by the enemy, I thought it would be a good idea to fly a little tour with the Tarantula. So I was able to drop off a jackknife at Maris Helipad and Dust Bowl. I could follow on the minimap how the enemy was constantly attacking Dust Bowl. Very sobering, because the destruction of the factories before does not seem to have been enough to take away enough power from the enemy. Apparently I had overlooked factories. Nevertheless, I wanted to at least try to reduce the enemy presence at Dust Bowl to a minimum. I tried to use the refinery again as cover to shoot at arriving vehicles from the cover in front of the jets. Then I turned my attention to the jets in the air. The IRM S-1s are intended more for defense. But at least I managed to get one compass from the sky. After the airspace was clear so far, I advanced further south to level the way for the following troops. To make it easier for me to maneuver, I first had to destroy a linebreaker SAM. An AGM-48 was sufficient for this, which I could fire from cover in a relaxed manner. But now it got tricky. There was a convoy on the road in front of me, but its position data was not longer up to date. There was also a vehicle depot on the same road. I tried to get closer to the targets and used the outside view to get a better overview of the terrain.
VRS.
I first shot at a stationary aero sentry spec, which had no chance to defend itself. Afterwards, I hoped to be able to hit several targets by destroying an ammunition truck. A bolt strike took me under fire, and I saw that a part of the convoy had already covered a lot of distance. Unfortunately, the ammunition truck did not drag any other targets into scrap hell. Now I wanted to attack the convoy with a well-aimed blow. I sunbathed in the sun and landed the chicane. This allowed me to take my time to target the convoy's greatest threats. I believed that the entire convoy would already be in front of me. However, my reconnaissance didn't work, and I was shot at by the bolt strike in front of the farm. In panic, I tried to bring the chicane back into cover. Unfortunately, I made a pretty intense contact with the ground, which made the chicane lose weight quickly. I noticed that the aerodynamics of the chicane had suffered and it started to wobble at a high collective. So I reduced the collective to 50%. I didn't want to be torn apart in the air. I had the feeling that this battle would take a lot of time and I was slowly getting tired. In addition, my plan to weaken the enemy air support didn't quite work out, so I have to improve it again. After landing, I decided to stop my attempts for the time being and come up with a new strategy. I think I'll take my time to scout out where the enemy airframes are produced. Maybe there's a better approach. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoy flying, and I'll sign off with the usual fly safe.